FEMA and the agencies that responded to Katrina. Well, after a weekend of huge waves battering the East Coast, tonight's Tropical Roundtable touches on why and how they got so big. We go to the expert desk.
Yeah, hey, Alexandra. I mean, it was all an amazing weekend. We saw these huge waves roll in, and unfortunately, even up toward Acadia National Park, we saw 5 people that were swept out to sea. Even today, out of the National Weather Service in New York City, there was a risk, a moderate risk of rip currents, so well beyond Bill going by. And sometimes even Dr. Lyons has mentioned to us that, guys, the risk could actually be worse after the storm and through here. Well, we are out in the expert area. Look at those waves just batter that ship around that Coast Guard ship. Just incredible. Obviously very, very unsafe. Many, many beaches closed, not surprisingly, this weekend. And I get to pick up and play with the Cantore Cam once again. We're going to talk about rogue waves and also get an idea of what's the deal. Bill producing huge wave action, but will what could be Danny do the same thing? Now, last week was my first effort with this, Cam. I made a few of you a little sick. You had to dig some Tums. I'll try and go easy on you today. So there's the Cam. There's the gentleman who handed it to me. Thank you very much, sir. And here's Dr. Steve Lyons. All right, Dr. Steve, talk to us about the large breakers and how they can get so big. How do we go from 15 feet to what could be, you know, the type of wave that sunk the Edmund Fitzgerald?
Well, the thing that happens basically in ocean waves is when you have winds, they generate a whole bunch of different sizes of waves. Some are little, some are medium, and some are big. So when we look at a buoy observation, say 15 feet in 16 seconds, that's what we had off the coast of Maine. That buoy observation is what we consider the average of the highest 1/3. So we take all of the highest 1/3 of the waves, average them together, and we get that wave height. But mixed in there are smaller waves and a couple of much larger waves in there as well. So that's part of the problem there, is that we have a bunch of waves that are of different size. Now, when the wave comes to the coastline, what happens is the wave is shoaled up along the coast, and so you get breakers that are much higher at the beach than you would in the open ocean. So we get 20 to 25 foot breakers at the coast. So that's another problem there. Then on top of that, we get points of land that focus the wave energy, and that's called wave refraction. The wave energy bends toward points of land, so now we get 30 to 35 footers. But now remember, we already had the 15-footers, and some of those 15-footers mixed in there were much higher waves. Ooh. We can actually have waves that are more like 30 feet that do the same thing, and by the time they get to the coast, they can break very briefly as 50 or 60-foot waves. And it turns out, as the waves break on the coast, Jim, the water that rises up on the coast or rushes up the beach depends on the breaking wave height. So you can stand there and watch 15-footers and waves, the water's trickling at your feet, and then suddenly you get these great big breakers that occur every 15 minutes or so, and the water rushes up the beach and suddenly it's at your waist. That's why we tell people to stay off the rocks, because those freak waves that they call rogue waves, we know are going to occur always, and those will sweep people into the water, and that's what happened in Maine. We got very large, brief breakers that swept in, caught people by surprise, but in general, we didn't have that big a wave on average.
All right, Dr. Lyons, we appreciate that. Tom Moore's with us tonight. Also, he's the lead forecaster here at the Weather Channel. And Tommy, who was it? The gales of November came early. Gordon Lightfoot, and what was he talking about? He was speaking about those kind of waves that sunk the Edmund Fitzgerald, wasn't he?
Yeah, there's some awfully big storms that come through in November in the Great Lakes. They wind up like tops, come up through Lake Superior area, and they can cause incredible winds and waves that affected the Edmund Fitzgerald.
Were you shocked at the waves that Bill produced?
Well, as you can always get a tremendous wave, and don't forget, Bill was once a Category 4 hurricane out there in the Atlantic. It came all the way across the ocean, and it was churning up for a long, long time before it ever got to the eastern seaboard of the U.S.
All right, buddy, we appreciate that. Dr. Lyons, let's talk a little bit about this. Bill, huge wave producer. Let's talk about if we get a Danny, similar track, but is it going to produce those kind of waves?
No, we don't expect any waves anywhere near as big as Bill produced. A couple of things here. Bill, one, was a strong hurricane, but the more important thing was it had a very large wind field. That's what generated the high waves, and the speed of motion of the circulation controls how big the waves get. In the case of Bill, it stayed offshore the U.S. coast, but all the waves that were generated here moved all the way onto the coast and all the way up the coastline, and it was a speed of motion the size of the circulation.
So what's going to happen with this thing as it heads up?
Well, we think this one's going to, one, be much weaker system.
Right.
It's not going to be a Category 4, no. A much smaller circulation, and it's not going to have time to generate the waves. So as we look at the circulation moving toward the coastline, some of the waves will be bigger, and it'll cause rip currents, of course, but much weaker and not near as big a wave action at the coastline. But we could have some water rise from it at the coast. We could have some rain from it and some stronger winds than in Bill.
All right, thank you very much, Dr. Steve Lyons on the Cantore Cam in the Forecast Center tonight. Thank you, Tom Moore. Guys, we'll be right back as we keep an eye on what's happening in California with the new